Welcome to Martini Time. I'm watching my father's timepiece to see when it's exactly at 5 o'clock. This was, I talked about this the other day, but I had it restored, but this was given to my father in 1929 when he graduated from Annapolis. And there are two things I inherited from my father. One was his watch. And the other one was a strict adherence to the happy hour. So I'm sure he held that watch and waited until it was 5 o'clock before he could have his happy hour drink. So I remember the family was always at 5 o'clock. He would fix him and his wife. They drink highballs, which was whiskey and water. And they'd have one or two highballs before dinner, and that was it. So that happy hour was kind of like a protective shell that kept you from becoming an alcoholic. And I wanted to talk, I had this on my shelf. Speaking about protective shells, a friend of mine some years ago had some, I don't think they were ostriches, they were emus, but they were big birds, and this was their egg, you know. So, and when I saw that with the broken thing, I said, I got that, you know, that this, to me, this is a metaphor. And I find these in my life as little signs of my own breaking out of my shell. We're all breaking out of some shell. It's like life is a series of Russian nesting dolls. You're in one shell after another, and as soon as you think you broke out of one shell, you're knocking on another one. And the question is, when you're in it, how do you know you're in a shell? And when you break out of a shell, does the breaking out come from the outside or the inside? You see. If you press on, the shell is designed to withstand external hits, you know, but it's very weak from the inside. Because you can actually see how this thing is designed. So everything supports like a cathedral. It supports itself from external pressure, but inside, poop, very weak. So how do you know you're in a shell? Isn't that an interesting question? Well, obviously, pain. So when we experience some kind of psychological pain, not physical pain, like I hurt my foot or something, stepped on a nail or something like that, but the psychological pain is our story of pain, and that's the pain, what Buddha calls suffering, is psychological pain, and we always perceive that pain is coming from the outside on us, you see. And so we say, you know, you're rubbing me the wrong way. But is that pain coming from the outside or the inside? How do you know? See, if I'm like this, see, now I can rub that both ways. So that if I were on in other words, if I'm on the inside of the shell and I experience the rub, maybe the scratching on it, you see. If I experience this, is somebody trying to get in and eat my yolk? Or is somebody trying to open me out? How do I know, you see? Now, if I identify with the shell, in other words, I'm not ready to come out yet, so I have a shell to protect me, well, then all these scratches and rubs are going to be threats. I'm not ready to come out. Don't break my shell. So I'm defensive, and I'm attacking back, you see, and I'm clenching down, hunching down, and contracting, you see. But the contraction is also pain. You know yourself, when you're contracted, it's called stress. That you have to go to a therapist to loosen you up, you see. Oh, you're all contracted. Loosen up, you see. Why is that contraction there? Because it's the pain in the mind, the clutching, and the fear of being exposed. We're not ready to be exposed. Here is the minotaur in the labyrinth. You see, here is the pain of our shame, the pain of our life, you see, the pain of being vulnerable, the pain of being vulnerable and exposed, and people will know that I'm really a fraud, you see. This pain is protected by a shell, and we think we're not conscious of that shell, but we only feel the shell when there is pain. So that if we're interested in breaking out, see, and that is the soul's interest, the soul's intent, the soul's desire is to be free of the shell, because the shell is boundaries. So anytime I create a boundary and make myself into a special person, a special group, a special country, a special this or that, I have created a boundary and I've created a shell. And now that shell is going to be under attack, I feel, from the outside, which makes the shell harder. More boundaries, bigger wall, more walls, you see. And all the time, that pressure from the outside is pressure from the inside. You see, there's no boundaries in reality. Boundaries are only created by the mind. Walls are only created by the mind. And in reality itself, there is no boundaries. You can't go anywhere in a reality and come up against a wall and say, you can't go any further, you see. There is no boundaries. You can keep going into infinity. There's no boundaries, either externally into space or internally through microscopic zooming in or zooming out. There's no boundary. There's no wall to the end of reality. You come up against it and say, that's it. You see? There is no it. It's all potential. It's all open. And so the soul is reality. The soul is life. And the soul has no boundaries. But the mind, you see, creates the egg, and we live inside of it until we're ready to break out. So if we're not ready to break out, then we're not going to break out, because the pressure has to come from within to get out of the shell. So when we see, and this is what Zen is all about. This is why I love this tradition and this teaching, because it really is a manual and it's called Dharma, a teaching of how to break out of the shell, and what are the signs to tell you that you're in a shell. Unless I know I'm in a shell, I can't break out of it, you see, because I'm misinterpreting the scratch, the pain, and the knocking on the outside. I say that's the enemy. That's the enemy trying to get in, you see. But when we understand the laws of the egg, we realize that that is me, my soul, tapping on the inside, but my paranoid, little fearful mind is interpreting it as coming from the outside. So I become my own enemy, you see. I create the shell, which creates the contraction, which creates the pain, and I blame outside of the shell, which makes me more contracted. So this keeps going until you just explode, or you just kill yourself. There's no way out. So at some point, there comes a shift. There comes a shift when the awareness that is in the soul is awareness. The soul isn't a thing. You can't find a soul running around. It's awareness. It's light. It's boundless. It's infinite. It's relationship. It's presence. It's creativity. It's joy, you see. And all of this has one intention: to be free. So but the ego says, well, you can only be free when you have a wall, and you be free inside the wall. That's like saying I'm only free inside the egg, you see. So think about this. I find metaphors for my own awakening, my own soul. The soul loves metaphors. The soul feeds on metaphors. Oh, give me another metaphor, because it understands itself through metaphor, not through prose and logic. It's through metaphor and art. So come upon these in your own everyday life. They're everywhere. Your soul will recognize them and put it on a shelf and say, this is my metaphor for today. This is how I break out of my eggshell today. So thanks for coming to It's Martini Time, and I'll see you at happy hour tomorrow.